In today's video, we're going to take a deep dive through a topic that I have found confusing in the past, which is Employee Central pay components. So stick around.
All right, so in this video, we're going to go over pay components and what all the configuration means within SuccessFactors. In order to get to pay components, you go to Manage, Org, Pay, and Job Structures. Manage Organization, Pay, and Job Structures. So we go here, and from here, we are going to, in our example, we're going to create a new pay component. So all I'm going to do now is just quickly walk you through what each of the fields means, because in and of themselves are a little bit confusing. So the more we can provide you some background on these, the easier it'll be for you to maintain these going forwards. Pay component ID, this is typically just going to be your ID. If you're using SuccessFactors with a SAP backend, then this is going to need to be the same as a wage type ID, which is typically 4 numbers. So I'm just going to put in 4 numbers just for fun. Then you just put in the name. Let's just say, let's just call this just hazard pay. All right, so you can put in a description. That does not have any particular value. Oh, one other thing to keep in mind is you always want to keep track of your effective date of your pay component. So if this needs to be something that you can use in the past, then make sure that your pay component is set. I have a habit of just putting everything as of 1/1/1900 to make sure that everything is available whenever to all of your processes. So that's a good habit to get into. So just make sure that you take care of that effective date. Then your status, active, inactive, that should be pretty straightforward. So if you have a pay component that you're using today, but you don't want to use it in the future, you can just flip it to inactive, and it's still valid for the people that have it today. So it's not going to cause your system to blow up, or anyone that already has it they're not going to blow up based on the fact that you've deactivated it. But what it does is it prevents others in the future from selecting the same pay component. There are 2 types of pay components. There's amount and percentage. I'm going to flip it to percentage just to let you see that if you do set to percentage, then you have to set what the pay component group is. So it's got to have its calculation base. Your calculation base is typically going to be something usually like annual salary. So if you had a bonus amount, that's where your base pay component group would come into play. So you could say 10% of your annualized salary is going to be an incentive amount. I'm just going to get rid of that now. We're just going to keep to a nice simple amount pay component though. Next one is earning. So this is important because if you are using the recurring deductions portlet, then this is earning tells the system whether you want the pay component to be available on recurring payments. The recurring payments portlet, that's the one that we're all used to that shows up in the new hire, or the recurring deductions. That's the new portlet that shows up, and it's only used to keep track of deductions. So by making this set to yes, then the amount shows on pay components, on recurring payments. If we set this to no, then the pay component is available to recurring deductions. All right, so currency, that is self-explanatory. Won't get into that. Pay component value, this is if we want to put in a fixed amount for pay component value. I don't use this one that often because if you're using like pay scales and you wanted to give someone a fixed amount for pay scale purposes, there's another place to do that in the system that we're not going to get into on this video. But if you did have, let's say, a fixed deduction amount that you wanted to put in here and it never changes, then you can make that update here on the pay component value. But otherwise, you can just put that in directly on the info type, on the screen itself. Frequency, again, self-explanatory. I'm not going to get it too far into that. This next one is another one that's pretty important, and that is recurring. If we set this to yes, then the pay component is available as a recurring payment type. So when I go into recurring payment, I would see this value, hazard pay, as something that I could maintain. Bear in mind that when I set something to recurring, it's available on the recurring payments, either the recurring payment or recurring deduction. However, if I set this to, even if I set this to yes, and I say it's a recurring payment, I still can go in and use that same pay component as a one-time deduction or one-time payment, depending on what I have set the earnings flag to. To restate another way, all pay components are available for one-time payments or deductions, depending on your configuration, on where you set that earning flag. Only pay components that are set to recurring are available to the recurring. So hopefully that makes sense. Next is tax treatment. I haven't really used that. This next can override. I always set this to yes. Can override is really important because this is whether or not you are able to actually type in a value on the recurring payment or recurring deductions. That means that this is whether or not you can actually, the user, when they're going in and filling in the pay component, can actually put in a value. Otherwise, if you set this to no, then you're expecting this pay component value is going to default in a specific value for that pay component, and so therefore we would never be able to override it. In almost all cases, this field will need to be set to yes. Because in most cases you're going to be inputting the amount of the pay component directly on the screen, or maybe there's a business rule that's doing it for you. Either way, the can override should be set to yes. Self-service description. So this is just if you want to come up with a separate way of using, you want to come up with one name that you're using behind the scenes and then one that you're using on self-service. Okay, so this next one's confusing. Display on self-service. What this is getting at is, do you want this value to be available via take action? And of course, take action is typically the way that we expect, say, managers or whoever else is going to be involved in the process to be able to go in and provide updates within the system. That's on self-service. If we set this to no, then we can only use this pay component in expert mode. So for the most part, I tend to set this to yes, display on self-service, because I can always permission out each pay component. I can go into every role and decide whether or not that pay component is available or not for each role. So I typically is going to set this to yes all the time, every time. So that's that. Used for comp planning. This field is how we decide whether or not a value is used, say, for example, for your merit pay. So we can only set one pay component as yes for this. So normally this is just going to be your base pay, because you're going to use your base pay for your compensation planning. Annualized salary we're going to use that for comp planning. We set this used for comp planning is what we would set this to, and then the merit process is going to know that when it needs to pull up your annualized salary, it's going to use that value. Okay? All right. Next up is the is target. So is target is another one that can be confusing. So if you set this to no, that means that on recurring payments, the value is going to be in the top section of recurring payments. If I set is target to yes, that means that the amount, or excuse me, this pay component will show up in the target section of the recurring payments. So it's just a matter of, if you set this to no, then it's a regular pay type. If it's set to yes, then really this is just a target, which means that it's just a way for us to show people what they potentially could be making if all goes well. This is another one of those fields that if I go in and I can't find my pay component when I go look at my recurring payments, sometimes I'll see that I accidentally set this is target to yes, and then I notice that this value is available on the is in the target section. All right, maximum decimal places. This can come into play on some of your payments if you need to be able to have going out multiple decimal places, so that it reduces the problems with rounding and when we're doing some calculations. So you can just set this as necessary. And then end dated payments. This is used, of course, if we need to have we need to be able to end date a payment. So let's say that this hazard pay in our example, let's say that we want to have it set so that this expires in 2 months automatically, then we have to set the enable end date payments in order for that to happen.